call in our next guest, who in his typical irreverent, outspoken way has written some about this. From our Newsmax TV newsroom here in South Florida, we call on Javier Manjarres, the managing editor of the Shark Tank political blog. Javier, you took no prisoners with a somewhat irreverent assessment of the stewardship of Speaker John Boehner and the efforts afoot to get him out of the speakership.
Are you referring to the reference to the boozing?
Well, that's the headline you have right there.
He doesn't want to
say
it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I just think that there are so many policy issues at work here that whatever personal attributes or weaknesses you may want to point out really run secondary to the disconnect between Speaker Boehner and grassroots conservatives, or more importantly, the conservatives within the House Republican Conference.
Yeah, JD, I've spoken to a number of these members of Congress. Listen, they detest Boehner for what he's done. I've named a couple that are actually have been considering running for the speakership or have been under consideration by other members of their colleagues. But no one's going to step up. What are they going to do? Look, they did the same thing last year and the time before that, and no one stepped up. They all went and voted for Speaker Boehner. So I don't give them much credence in when they tell me that, hey, we're against this guy, we're looking for someone. Why don't they step up? But look, Louis Gohmert just stepped up, and so did Florida Congressman Ted Yoho. So I tip my hat to them for actually throwing their hats, like Miranda, throwing their names in the ring there. But look, I don't expect anything to come out of this. A lot of these so-called conservatives in the Congress are just blowing hot air.
So you don't think Yoho stands a shot?
No, because he's a great candidate for this speakership. Anyone besides Boehner is. But the problem is a lot of these so-called conservative Republicans, look, they all want what everyone else wants. They all want power. They all want to take that next step up in the leadership, believe it or not. And so, like I said, I don't think anyone is going to beat Boehner simply because everyone is going to fall in line and support Boehner, especially the conservative Republicans.
Well, let's outline the reasons why. And I'm going to talk more about this in the commentary, but the fact is, every member of Congress, in addition to constitutional duties, really has an inside game and an outside game. And that's not necessarily counterproductive or any way devious, but it's that you want to do what you can to serve the people back home, but also if you have the chance to get a key committee assignment that in turn can help your district, you want to do that too. And so that's kind of the push me, pull you at work for a lot of these members, which is why behind closed doors they'll say, man, I can't handle Boehner, but when push comes to shove and everybody has to stand up and publicly state a preference, it's why people perhaps fall in line. What else is at stake from your evaluation of this double life that many within the House Republican Conference maintain?
But JD, don't forget that all these members of Congress are up for re-election every year or every 2 years, and so they need the Boehners of the world, the Cantors, the McCarthys, to campaign for them, raise money for them. Again, like you mentioned, the committee assignments. That's all this is. Listen, you know this better than anyone. When you get to Congress, pretty much change. You may go up there as a maverick who's going to make changes, who's not going to be part of the status quo. But you know what? Everyone who goes up there becomes part of the status quo. And again, they just want to be invited to the next dinner, the next little shindig at the Capitol. It's all smoke and mirrors. I don't buy anything they say or believe anything they say.
But Javier, having said that, is this just another example of the internal struggle that we keep hearing about within the Republican Party?
There's an internal struggle all the time within the Democrat and the Republican Party. Just the press seems to kind of accentuate what happens with Republicans because, hey, they want to demonize the whole Republican Party, and they have done so effectively because of the weak Republican Party who hasn't been able to push back and counter that narrative that the media has set. So again, this isn't any news. This is old news.
Yeah, and yet, when I hear this blanket indictment, having been there and done that to a certain degree, I have to tell you that there are a lot of people who stand up on key issues. If not, the challenge is to pick your battles carefully, and people do take a look at the assignments. I can assure you it's not always based on dinners and always based on campaign dollars. But against that backdrop, some criticism of the current speaker has been that he's not been a good listener. that he's not listened to the grassroots or really to the conservatives within his conference. I used to say of Denny Hastert, whatever flaws Denny may have had, he was a good listener, and he had the Hastert rule where he would not bring issues to the floor unless he had a majority of the House Republican majority. Has the action of Speaker Boehner to work, for lack of a better term, in cahoots with the Democrats, including President Obama, on this funding the government through September, has this been the biggest source of complaints among the Republican members with whom you speak?
Well, yes, but also remember everything that Boehner has done over the past couple of years, 4 years. He's capitulated to a lot of the things President Obama has put out there. He hasn't pushed back as many Americans have wanted him to. A lot of members of, like you mentioned, of Congress that I've spoken to that it will not go on the record. But they don't trust him. They think he deals too much with President Obama, and he does too much of President Obama's bidding. He negotiates too much with Obama and pretty much doesn't get anything out of it when they had the majority in the House. They've had the majority in the House for the past 4 years. So again, this is the big test here for Republicans and conservatives in the Congress is this vote tomorrow, whether or not they oust someone like Speaker Boehner, because how he goes, so goes the whole Republican caucus.
A minute and a half remains in this segment, Javier. A couple of weeks ago, if memory serves, or I beg your pardon, 30 seconds. Tell you what, I'm going to hold this point and we will come back to it, but it's a suspicion that Matt Drudge gave voice to a while back, and I will ask you about it again in just a few minutes. I want you to think about the Boehner file. Does the current administration have something on the speaker? That's what Drudge said. You think about that, and we'll have you back to answer the question.
Up.
We'll continue following this Newsmax Now update. Let's also welcome back Javier Manjarres, managing editor of the Shark Tank political blog. Javier, I asked you to ponder a question really based on an utterance and observation by Matt Drudge at his Drudge Report a couple of weeks ago, saying, wow, the administration must really have something on John Boehner. That's one school of thought that may be somewhat provocative, but what about the split that we see within the Republican conference, where you have the grassroots Republicans versus the Washington establishment Republicans? In all likelihood, is that probably more of what is motivating Speaker Boehner, his establishment outlook these days?
Right, to the point that Matt Drudge made. I mean, I think the Obama administration has something on everyone. Everyone's got a skeleton in their closet. I don't think they're holding anything against Boehner. They could be, who cares? But to the other point of the division within the Republican caucus in the House of Representatives, look, I think Boehner is feeding off that. Look, he has capitulated a bit to the conservative base on immigration reform. But again, this is about power. Remember, the Speaker of the House is the third most important or most powerful person in Capitol Hill. He's third in line to be president. So you think Boehner wants to give up that post? He's going to fight to the tooth and nail to keep his position, just like Nancy Pelosi will, or she did.
Javier, what does Boehner need to do to win back the support of his party? And how critical is it that he does that?
Well, it's pretty simple. What he needs to do is listen, like JD mentioned earlier. He needs to listen to not so much the establishment members of the House, but the conservatives who represent a lot of mainstream Americans, but also the conservative Americans that are paying attention and railing against him for what he's done. Look, he can't sit there and with the president and do the president's bidding. That's why they elected a Republican-led House. That's why the Americans voted in and elected a Republican-led Senate. The people have voiced their opinion and stated what they want, and people like Boehner need to listen up.
Javier, let's think about what may be happening as new members are arriving and as old members return to Washington for the swearing in of the next Congress tomorrow. Are you hearing anything from your contacts there? Has the Speaker gone into a charm offensive, sitting down with some of the key conservatives, offering them blandishments such as new committee assignments or honorary leadership posts? What are you hearing?
He's been doing that since last December. I was up on the Hill about 3 weeks ago, and they were telling me the ones that were not newly elected, but the ones that are coming into their second term or third term in the Congress. And Boehner, knowing that he could face some pushback with his re-election speaker, he was out, pretty much, doing the campaigning to them and offering, being Santa Claus and offering them whatever they wanted and working with them in hopes that they would support his speakership. And again, he's already reached out to those members elect that are coming in that'll be sworn in tomorrow. This is par for the course. I don't think it's new to Capitol Hill. I think this has always been the case with whomever is running for speaker or re-election of the speakership.
Javier, what will be the most critical issues the new Congress will need to tackle this year?
New issues, I think, are the old issues, Obamacare and immigration reform. Immigration reform is a big issue. I don't care what anyone thinks or says, because this is an issue that can very well transform the makeup of the United States of America. We may one day be called the United States of Amigos.
Well, mindful of what is going on in terms of the border question, and this becomes the real troubling dynamic for the Speaker, even if he hangs on to the job, to have a united conference. The fact that he continues to state that, boy, Jeb Bush is his guy hands down, even though his fellow Ohioan and former colleague in the Congress, Governor John Kasich, may run for president. This notion of lining up and being joined at the hip with Jeb Bush, and of course we know Jeb's viewpoint on amnesty, that is going to create, is there anything that's going to heal this rift short of having just the knockdown drag out in the primaries for next year? 30 seconds.
Absolutely not. Remember, this is about power. The people in power now want to stay in power, and the people that want to oust these people that are in power want to take that power. So again, nothing's going to change. Boehner's still going to be the Speaker of the House. They're all going to back Bush. They're going to fall in line and back Jeb Bush, kind of like what they did in 2010 when they all fell in line and backed Charlie Christopher, Senator Marco Rubio. But we all saw how that turned out for them.
So a word of caution to those who would pursue the aims and goals of the establishment. Javier Manjarres, we appreciate your insights. I have a little different take on what Javier had to say about the leadership battle. That is coming up, and there is more to come. So stay with us as America's Forum continues here on Newsmax TV.